Thank you for joining me on the AP Pro Football Podcast. Now, you played football at Harvard. You wrestled in the WWE. But for those who may not know your story listening for the first time, can you tell me how you became interested in researching, studying CTE, and then eventually starting the Concussion Legacy Foundation?
Yeah, happy to. So as you mentioned, played football at Harvard, had a great time, didn't have any diagnosed concussions or issues. At WWE, I had a few concussions, again, none diagnosed because I wouldn't tell anyone how I'm feeling. But there was a last one that left permanent symptoms. And I tried to play through them, or wrestle through them for 5 weeks, and I lied. I covered it up, even though it was really bad. And that gave me actually a sleep disorder. That was what I started acting out my dreams and hurt myself jumping off of a bed, not even realizing I did it. Until I woke up a few minutes later. And that's what took me to be honest. And then went on this odyssey to try to get the headaches to go away so I could get back to work. And that's where I met Dr. Robert Cantu, and she founded the Concussion Legacy Foundation with. He taught me three things. One, I didn't know what a concussion was, and I've been playing through them thinking they were just dings and no big deal. Two, that they are a big deal and you need to arrest them. And three, that there might be long-term consequences. And I was pretty frustrated with the idea that I'd been banging my head for 19 years and didn't know that. And so I thought, I'm going to take a stab at trying to change the culture around this, because I'm sure if athletes knew, they would change. That started with a book called Head Games Football's Concussion Crisis. But a book, was not enough, right? A book on neuroscience written by a pro wrestler does not fly off the shelves. So as I was trying to figure out, well, how are we going to get people to pay attention? CTE was first diagnosed as an NFL player. And I realized that's what's going to change everyone's minds, because concussions are invisible. CTE is visible. You can see the disease, and it helps us appreciate we're hurting our brains. And so I started conducting outreach to families to coordinate brain donation, starting with Andre Waters, who was the third NFL player diagnosed, and then realized that's the future. Started the foundation, partnered with Boston University to start this brain bank. Now we're 1,300 brains later, and we're concussion protocols everywhere, and it's been a wild ride.
Wow. Take me back to what happened to you in wrestling, right? You're going through, you suffer a concussion, and you're trying to fight through it, because that's what we do, right? You tough it out, you try to man up, all of that stuff. I've had a couple over the course of my life playing sports, and you just don't want to say anything to anybody. I would imagine there are other guys, other wrestlers who were experiencing the same thing. And did you even talk about it? Did you do anything like that with anyone else?
We talked about it because it happens so much. I mean, I remember one of my colleagues getting a concussion, and I had to be the guy to sit with them in the locker room while the athletic trainer, managed someone else. And he just kept asking me the same questions over and over. Like, we knew the really bad ones, but we just never considered the ones where, like in my match, I blacked out and I forgot the end of the match. And I told my guys I was wrestling with, I said, I don't know what's happening. I forgot everything. And I was the Harvard guy. I never forgot everything. And they just said, okay, they made it. They just kept telling me what to do. And we just pretended it didn't happen. A few minutes later, when the match ended, all I have is a headache, but now I'm with it. And so at that point, I thought, what's the point of telling anyone what I went through? Because I'm fine now, except for the headache, and headaches happened all the time. And I'm used to it. And so, we had, without educating athletes, we're really setting them out there to destroy themselves.
There was such a lack of awareness, as you're discussing right now, for so long about concussions and head injuries. How much do you think athletes, coaches, doctors right now have a better understanding, say, from maybe just 10 years ago?
Well, it's night and day on concussions, right? Everybody understands concussions are bad. I don't think people understand the lower threshold of concussions, so people are still playing through most of the dings and bell ringers. That, although, is really a reality of football. So there was a study that was very interesting where they surveyed college football players postseason. For every one concussion they knew they had diagnosed, they claimed they had 6 they covered up. But they also said they had 21 dings or bell ringers they would cover up. So effectively, it was a 1 in 28 concussions were being diagnosed in college football. And this was a huge survey just after the season. So that's the reality of football, that we're covering up way more concussions than we're finding. And that's always going to be that way, because a game where you're getting hit in the head 24 times in a game, you're going to feel symptoms very frequently, multiple times a year.
You don't consider every ding, though, a concussion, correct?
No, I mean, the reality is that by definition, that's a concussion. If you get a traumatic event, you get hit in the head or you fall, and your brain starts functioning differently, your way you interpret the world differently, you feel differently, your head hurts, you get double vision, you get ring in your ears, sky tint changes color a lot, that is a concussion, even if it lasts 10 seconds, right? So that's that lower threat. The reality is most people, if it doesn't last more than 5 minutes, we ignore it. And we're hurting ourselves. We do that because your brain needs time to recover. To answer the other part of your question, though, we do talk about concussions now. Knowledge of CTE for active athletes, it's near zero. So when I actually, like, active athletes don't call us. I have like one a year from the NFL who'll be like, I feel like I should know what I'm doing to myself. It's like one a year calling our team.
Wow.
And then when I meet them, like at the Super Bowl or events, we start getting into it. You know, the last one I talked to said, God, I'm kind of embarrassed that I didn't know that concussions are not really what's causing CTE. It's all those repetitive hits to the head that are correlated with CTE. And that frustrates me and pains me because, you know, that's somebody that down the road may already have the disease or may get it. And he didn't know he was getting it in 2022, right? That even though it's on the front page all the time, there's literally like a wall between the information and the people out there taking the risk. The college football programs are not informing their players about CTE. NFL programs are not telling them, they're not sitting down and saying, this could be you. They're just pretending that a better helmet and a protocol will save them. And I promise you it will not. And the fact that players are now bigger, stronger, and faster, significantly bigger, stronger, and faster than even were 20 years ago, means that we are still going to see the worst of CT coming. And these early deaths like Demaryius Thomas with stage 2 is going to be the norm. And the only reason we don't know about more cases is because luckily people don't die young that often. But the ones that do die young that we get their brains, they almost always have CT.
So how far do we have to go to get current players to understand the realities of CTE?
That's a great question because they're not seeking the information because they see that other players like a Chris Borland, for example, who did engage with the information, decided to walk away. And football is a little bit of a messed up sport in the sense that to get to the NFL where you're finally getting paid, you've been playing for at least 8 years, maybe 10 or 12, not getting paid. You've already, have all that sunk cost. And now someone's offering you millions of dollars to go do just one more season. It's really hard to walk away. But we as a culture have to wrap our heads around this idea that everybody's signing up as a kid. No one understands what they're getting into. And only when they're adults and they're at least 18, but probably in their 20s, can they kind of start to think about their life after football. And at that point, it's so hard to walk away. No one's doing it. But then when we talk to them in their 40s, 50s, and they're already having problems, can't hold down a job, struggling with their families, causing divorce, whatever it is, they regret it because you only get one healthy brain. And to ruin it and to leave the back end of your life so terrible is not a choice that most people would make if they really understood it. So we should be a little troubled by all this.
Will you recommend playing football to young kids, and how do you feel just about the sport right now, where it is?
So I am, I firmly believe that no child should be allowed to play before high school. Like, it's just insane that a sport that's killing adults, that we would put a kid in when they have all of these reasons that they're less protected, right? No medical staff on the sidelines, no concept of understanding a brain injury or concussion. No, no coaches with no training. Like, it's absurd that we do that. So I wouldn't suggest no unless their kid played before high school. And then we could get football to a point where it makes us less uncomfortable. The number one problem we still have is hitting in practice. So there's a study out last year. The NFL, when I walked in and told the players back in 2009 at the first ever meeting of the new advisory board that I helped get started, I said, number one way to protect yourself is that 70% of head impacts are happening in practice. You don't need them. You already know how to play. Get rid of that. And now it's less than 20%, and it's almost all in the preseason as people are fighting for spots. But they all know we don't hit in practice. There was a study that came out 10 years later, just last year, saying college is still at 70% because there is no union for college football players. So they're getting destroyed in practice. High school, we don't have much eyes into, but some states have, like a 15-minute limit per week in New Jersey, but most states don't have much of a limit, and they're still getting more than half their hits. So I'm disappointed that football is not responding and jumping at the opportunity to make this game safer for the boys they're trying to turn into men. And so until there are dramatic limits on hitting in practice and coaches change, I don't know if I would put my kid in high school football, unless it's a program where I know they don't hit in practice. And then there's still other changes we need to make. We started working with a Metropolitan Independent Football League in New York for high school football. No more kickoffs. No one ever wanted to be on the kickoff team. I was on the kickoff team. We called it the Suicide Squad in high school because we knew how insane it was. So we can reform the game and get to a place where CT isn't happening that much, but it starts with not letting kids play, and it starts with not letting hitting happen in practice. And until that happens, I don't know, if anyone should be going out there.
Now you have a role with the NFLPA, correct? Where you're able to have access to these guys. Can you expand on that role a little bit?
Yeah, I'm on the Mackey White Health and Safety Committee. I'm one of the original members of that. So what happened was 2009 Super Bowl, we were trying to raise awareness. Gene Upshaw had just passed away. The NFLPA had actually fought us originally when we first started finding CT cases. Gene Upshaw famously said, "My father died of dementia, and he just worked in the factory like anyone can get dementia." Wow. He was dismissive. But when D. Smith came in, I actually reconnected with somebody I knew from years ago named Sean Morey, who was on the executive committee, who played in the league for 11 years. And he helped, based with this information, he went to D. Smith and said, "We need our own medical experts to go fight with," what I told him is, "You're being lied to by the NFL about these risks. You need your own experts. You need to protect yourselves." And that's what they did.
Now, you said earlier you suffered your concussion, which was career-ending in wrestling. Do you have an opportunity at all to advise guys, talk to guys? Do you have any connections to where you're getting in front there and talking?
Yeah, well, that's one of the things that warms my heart the most about this. Is the first professional league to welcome this information was the WWE in 2012. They started inviting me to come in and speak to the roster once a year to explain to them, these are the risks that you're exposing yourselves to, and here's how to manage them. Because again, I'm not anti-taking risks, right? I use a sport where I let people hit me or entertainment where I let people hit me in the head with a chair. Like, I get that, if you're getting, we let people do dangerous jobs for money. Like, we're okay with that. Cops, firemen, military. So the question is, can you do it with informed consent, and are there protections for you? And so now, the protections in place at a place like WWE are fantastic, with a ringside doctor there all the time. And when he has to go backstage to take care of someone, there's someone else there, right? And all of them know, too many hits to the head, I'll get CT. All of them know we think someone has a concussion, stop the match. There have been situations where referees have tackled guys because they didn't realize the person had a real concussion. So I'm thrilled at how much safer wrestling is, and that the WWE's embraced this. They even support the research. And now I also go and give an annual lecture to AEW Wrestling, which is another major promotion. So the wrestling community, is recognizing that they have options because it's entertainment, and they've embraced educating talent and making it safer. Football doesn't have that same culture. Like, I've never been invited to come speak to an NFL team or a college team to tell them what's going on, because I don't think people want them to know the truth.
That's very, very interesting. Tell me this: how do you go about approaching the family of an athlete that passes away and asking for their brain for the research for study? How difficult of a process is that? Isn't it much simpler if the athlete's already signed up, right? So their families don't have to make that tough decision?
Yeah, because I literally spent from 2006 to probably 2010, like almost all the brains that were studied, it was me calling people within 36 hours of someone dying and trying to talk to a grieving widow or parent or child. And it was, I've been doing it now for 15 years. Like, it's draining, but it's worth it because the families are so generous with listening and respectful and understand our mission. But at the beginning, it was daunting. I used to have to write a script. I used to be sweating when I called because I was just so nervous about how people would react. But because the first families were so great, it turned pretty quickly. I remember when Virginia Grimsley, who was her husband John was the first brain donated to our Boston University Center, so he's only the fifth NFL player ever diagnosed. We had just been on HBO Real Sports talking about this. And so when I called Virginia's house, a friend answered the phone and said, there's a man named Chris Nowinski on the phone. And Virginia, from across the room, I heard her say, tell him I know who he is, I know why he's calling, and tell him the answer is yes. Because people, families who've watched someone struggle really know what's going on. So the good news is we have been signing up people to pledge to donate their brain, and we do get a lot of people donate each year from that, so we don't have to make those calls. And now, because of the media coverage of this, so many families call us. In fact, I talked to an NFL widow today, or her husband's about to die. She called today to talk to us about this. Like, that's, again, families are wonderful about this. But I still have to make those calls like I did to the Thomas family. And luckily, they've heard of this work. They know its reputation. They know Dr. Ann McKee and the Boston University team are the best in the world. And so it's not hard to recruit brains to her brain bank. It's just complicated, and it's emotionally challenging for everyone involved.
Lastly, and I really do appreciate your time. And when I reached out to you, you were just quick to get back to me and respond and send me the information I needed and to set this up. So clearly your goal, your aim is to talk to as many people as you can about this. What is your hope? What do you want to see?
My hope is that we start to get committed to preventing CTE. If anyone takes anything away from this, it's that the idea that these hits to the head are causing CTE is we should have the highest confidence of anything in science and medicine that is true, right? This is smoking and lung cancer. The research has been done. It's been there. There has been an orchestrated campaign by professional sports who are liable for the CTE that their athletes get to confuse you on this issue. And whatever you've heard, bias sample, this or that, it's all not true. And I have a paper coming out that will explain this very clearly to people. Causation is proven. Therefore, if that's the case, we shouldn't give it to anybody else, but we are. And the reality is 95% of contact sport athletes in America are children. So we are giving this disease to children. We need to stop. We need to step back and reformulate our sports to have a youth version that doesn't cause repetitive head impacts, doesn't cause this disease. So I hope we don't have any new cases of this in a few years once we convince everyone this is all real. And then I hope that we recruit enough talent and resources to this issue that we actually have a cure for this someday, because there are far too many people dying of this. Especially for the NFL and college football community, or anyone who's played more than 10 years of football, we find far more positive cases than we do negatives in that sample. Doesn't mean that it's a 50% of X group yet. We don't know that, but it's way too easy to find. We just found the first MLS soccer player. We're finding it in nearly all but one NHL players we've studied. This is widespread. People are suffering. And there are way too few people working on this. There's not enough resources, and there's not enough of the athlete community advocating for this. It always surprises me when you think about, like, my cause, my cleats. The NFL players have an opportunity to do something. We've already proven at least 10% of NFL players have CTE. It's probably many-fold higher than that. So they're all walking around with this, but there's right now not an NFL player who is trying to support this research that would be a cure for them. And if you step back, you think that is an odd phenomenon. Because these guys have incredible power, they have incredible resources, and they're not directing them to something that would benefit them because of their concerns of backlash from coaches in the league. They've done a great job of making people scared to talk about this issue. And that's not going to help us get a cure. So I'm hoping that by having these conversations, and I've had so many ex-players reach out to me in the last day or two since Demaryius Thomas's news went out. But it's not the active guys, it's not the guys with the biggest platforms, and it's not the legends of the game. And we're going to need them. We're going to need them if we want to solve this.
Well, Chris, I really do appreciate your time. This is far too important, too serious of a conversation to ask you what was your favorite wrestling match. So we'll do that at some other point down the road. But thank you so much. I really do appreciate the information, the wisdom, and the knowledge.
All right, Rob, appreciate it. Look forward to working with you on this to educate the country.